Welcome back, Hornets. Today we're going to be in our Ready workbook in the language handbook section at the back. We're going to be looking at lesson 6 today, which is on using different kinds of sentences. This is on page 241, so you need to make sure that you have your Ready workbook out open. You need to also make sure that you have some sort of writing utensil. So if you're not prepared, go ahead and pause the video and make sure that you have out your materials. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So, the first thing I'm going to do is box in the title of my lesson, which again is using different types of sentences. So, for the last few weeks, we have been talking about different types of sentences. So, this is going to be kind of a refresher on that, but we're also going to be adding a new step to this. So, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite my title before I go any further. So, using different kinds of sentences. Okay, so we know that we are using different kinds of sentences. And this time we are going to be thinking about using these different types of sentences to eliminate wordiness and repetition. Okay, so today we're going to be doing our introduction. We're going to look at this chart that it gives us and talk about a few things. Tomorrow we will do the guided practice, and then the next day we'll do the independent practice. So we're going to break this lesson down over 3 separate days. So the intro says building your sentences in different ways can help you eliminate wordiness and make clear connections between ideas. So, we've discussed the 4 different types of sentences before: simple, compound, complex, and compound complex, but we haven't really used them a ton. We have worked on identifying them, um, and picking out different things within these type of sentences, but we haven't really practiced using them a ton, and that's where this workbook lesson is going to get us. We're going to learn how to actually use these different types of sentences um in writing. So, there are 4 basic types of sentences. So, these are the 4 types that we have been talking about this entire time. So, the chart is broken up into 3 columns. The first column is the type of sentence, then we have the definition of what that sentence consists of, and then we have an example. So, the first type of sentence that we have is a simple sentence. And our simple sentence is just made up of one independent clause. So that's what the definition says, is that it has one independent clause. And just as a refresher, an independent clause has a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone as a sentence by itself. It doesn't need any help to be independent. So a simple sentence is one independent clause. And the example that it gives us is jousting was a medieval sport. So my subject would be jousting, and my verb would be was. So I know I have a subject and a verb here, and it's just one single independent clause for that simple sentence. So the second type of sentence that it gives us is our compound sentences. So a compound sentence is an independent clause plus a comma with a coordinating conjunction and then another independent clause. So that is our compound sentence. So the definition the workbook gives us is that it has 2 or more independent clauses. So a compound sentence is only going to have independent clauses, and those 2 independent clauses are joined with our coordinating conjunctions. And just so you don't forget, those are our fanboys. So for, and, nor, but, or, yet. And so a compound sentence must have one of those coordinating conjunctions, one of those fanboy words. So the example that it gives us would be medieval knights had to be experts in battle, and jousting was one way to prepare for battle. So the first thing I want to notice is I have this coordinating conjunction and right before it I have a comma. So I know I have my fanboy and then I have my comma, and I have two independent clauses. So I have medieval knights had to be experts in battle. So knights would be my subjects, had to be is my verb phrase. And then I have experts in battle, and then I have my coordinated conjunction right here. And then I have another independent clause. So jousting was one way to prepare for battle. So jousting is my subject and was is my verb. So we know compound sentences. One independent clause with a comma and a coordinating conjunction, and then another independent clause. So complex sentences are next. So for a complex sentence, we have one independent clause plus a dependent clause. And just so you don't forget, a dependent clause cannot function as a sentence by itself. It has to have help from another clause. So, complex sentences that have those dependent clauses, you can identify the dependent clause by looking for a few things. You can look for your subordinating conjunctions, so those would be your SWABI words. So since, when, although, because, if. And you can also look for your relative pronouns for dependent clauses. So that's how we can identify those. And I'm going to put this down here. Okay. So we know a complex sentence has one independent clause and a dependent clause. So it's going to have at least one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. So let's look at our sentence. The example that it gives us says, although jousting was a form of entertainment, it also let knights practice important skills. So just looking at this sentence, the first thing I see is this word, although. Although is a subordinating conjunction, and I know based on my rules that subordinating conjunctions usually start dependent clauses. So, although jousting was a form of entertainment, it also let knights practice important skills. So, right here where I have my comma is where my dependent clause ends and my independent clause begins. So, it also let knights practice important skills. So, it let knights practice important skills. So I have my independent clause here and then my dependent clause beginning with the word although. So that's a complex sentence. So that's nothing new. And then we have our compound complex sentences. So this is where stuff gets a little bit more complicated because we have one independent clause plus another independent clause. And then we also have a comma with a coordinating conjunction, and then we have a dependent clause. So there are several ways that you could vary this up. So a compound complex sentence has to have two or more independent clauses and one or more dependent clause. And then it will also have a fanboy as well. So a comma with a coordinating conjunction. So it has that. And you can also look for your SWABI words because we know we have to have at least one dependent clause in this sentence. So the example that it gives us is jousting wasn't as dangerous as combat, but a knight could still be hurt when he fell off his horse. So just looking at this sentence, the first thing I'm going to notice would be my coordinating conjunctions. And I have the coordinating conjunction but, and then I have a comma right before it. So I know that I'm probably going to have an independent clause in there somewhere. And then I also have this word when. So when is a subordinating conjunction and it usually begins dependent clauses. So I know I'm going to have a dependent clause in there somewhere as well. So let's start breaking it down. Jousting wasn't as dangerous as combat. Well, you can put a period where that comma is and let this be a complete sentence. So, jousting would be your subject, was not or wasn't would be your verb. And then I have my comma with my coordinating conjunction but. And then a knight could still be hurt. Well, a knight could still be hurt. You could capitalize that A and put a period after hurt, and that could be a sentence all on its own. So a knight would be your subject, could still be hurt. That phrase is your verb phrase right there. And then when he fell off his horse. So when he fell off his horse, well, I know that this one is going to be a dependent clause because it begins with the word when, and I know he is my subject and fell is my verb. So I have an independent clause here, and then another independent clause, and then I have a dependent clause at the end. So within the examples it gives us, it has underlined the dependent clauses for you so that they are easy to see. So they are underlined. Okay, and then it also tells us down here that varying the sentence types so when you write can also make your writing more interesting to read. So that's the cool thing about sentence types. We have four, right? So we should work on using all four. When you're writing, if you are only using simple sentences, it's going to get kind of boring to read. It makes it way more interesting and way more exciting if you can vary the types of sentences that you use. So, for example, you can use a simple sentence, you can use a complex sentence, and you could throw in a compound complex or just a compound, and that makes your writing more interesting. So, one thing we are going to practice with in this lesson is combining different types of sentences. That way, we can start eliminating wordiness and connecting ideas. So, we're going to pause right here for today. And now that we have reviewed our different types of sentences and we've talked about what we're going to be doing in the future with connecting these types of sentences, I think we're good to stop. So tomorrow we're going to go back and we'll go through our guided practice and we will start getting into it. So if you have any questions, guys, about this little review on sentence types, make sure that you let me know. I'm always here to help. All right, guys. See ya.